Welcome to the Fifth Trooper Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fifth Trooper Podcast. This is Season 3, a beginner's guide to Star Wars Legion. My name is Jay Shalansky, and I'll be your host and guide as we walk from the very beginning of starting Star Wars Legion all the way out to maybe playing your first tournament or just playing casually. As you heard in the intro there, this is our third season. Season 1 was Legion focused. It was more talk radio style. And we talked a lot about Legion with my co-host Evan. And then Season 2, we did some exploring into other miniature games, talking about those games and also interviewing the creators of those games. We're going to continue doing that on our YouTube channel. And so if you want to learn more about other games, you can join us on YouTube. Now, this guide that we're about to start today is for beginners, very, very early in the process of starting Star Wars Legion, and it may help some of you who have been playing for a little while. But if you're interested in more in-depth analysis, you can listen to our sister podcast, The Notorious Scoundrels, and then also we have a Patreon channel where we do another Legion podcast, which is we call The Fifth Trooper After Dark, and it's a little bit more of us unchained talking about whatever is on our mind in the world of Legion. And you can find that at patreon.com/The Fifth Trooper. And also YouTube, you can find us by searching The Fifth Trooper. So now, this season is going to be an absolute beginner's guide to Legion. I'm going to try to walk you through the steps from buying your first core set, which is what we're going to talk about today, all the way through how to play for fun or play competitively, how to start a local group, all of that you'll need to know to be playing Legion on a regular basis. Each episode will have a blog companion piece that you can find on our website, thefifthtrooper.com. You can also find other posts on our blog that go more in depth and are more advanced skill level for Legion. So there's plenty to read on the blog, but these episodes will for sure have a companion piece with them every episode that may dive a little bit deeper into the topics that we talked about on that episode. All right, let's get started with episode 1. So you just bought a core set, or you're thinking about buying a core set. Now what? Right? This question comes up a lot and really has come up a lot since Legion started. So the first thing that I would recommend is if you already bought a core set, or if you're thinking about buying a core set, one of the things that you're going to want to do is try to find a friend who'd be interested in playing too. The reason I say this is because there's a lot of opportunity to split that set, both monetarily wise, but also with all the tokens and figures within the set. You may be a huge Empire fan or a huge Rebel fan, and if you could find a friend who's willing to play the other faction or who is passionate about the other faction in that core set, then you're going to save yourself a lot of money, number one, and also you're going to be able to build onto what you get out of that core set while a friend of yours is doing the same thing, so you'll always have somebody to play with. The second thing that I really recommend is no matter what faction you originally wanted to play, I highly recommend playing both factions in whatever core set you bought. So if you're not aware, there's 2 core sets. One takes place during the original trilogy or the Civil War era, which is the Empire and Rebels. And the second one is the Clone Wars era, which is the prequels, Clone Wars show, and so forth. So you may have bought it just to play Empire or just to play the Republic, but really what you want to do is play both factions. Every faction in this game plays differently and has different skill sets. And I know that being a Star Wars fan myself and being in your exact position, buying a core set just because I'm excited that A, there's a Star Wars game, B, that they have miniatures, and C, that it's a war game, that you may have not really understood or done the research on each of the factions. Now, in our next episode, I'm going to break down all of the factions. But in the meantime, what I would recommend is try to play as many factions as you can. They all have different play styles, and they all may speak to you better as a player versus just the theme, right? And so I know it's exciting to see Vader and the Empire, but maybe it's not really your style or, how your brain works. And that's okay, right? Maybe you just love Star Wars in the game and you can find one of the other factions that speaks better to you. So I recommend playing all the factions, but at least play the two that you have in the box just so you can understand how the game works from different faction viewpoints. The next thing is, I would recommend, before you do anything else, is play 5 to 10 times. Okay, the game, the base game and rules that come in the core set are pretty simple and pretty quick to play. If you're new to wargaming, this experience of playing about 5 to 10 times with the simple rules is really going to give you a nice baseline as how the game is going to run in the future, whether you're interested in playing that game, and what level of competency you have at understanding the rules and understanding, how the game's going to play moving forward. So the next thing that I recommend, now, if any of you are active listeners of the Fifth Trooper podcast or any of our streams of live games, you know that I personally hate Tabletop Simulator. This is a personal thing and was more in line with when we were having live games. So when I could go to my local store or go to a tournament, Tabletop Simulator wasn't very attractive to me. But my viewpoint has changed a little bit now as we're all kind of quarantined and as the world changes, being able to go down to the local shop just isn't a reality anymore. So Tabletop Simulator is really a lifesaver and allows the ability for players to play and see the game without having to A, purchase everything, and B, go anywhere. Now, for those of you that are newer to this idea, Tabletop Simulator is a video game that is on the Steam platform. You can get it. The price varies. It's all over the place. But basically, Tabletop Simulator does exactly what the name is. It simulates tabletop gaming. There's tons of mods for every game you could think of practically. But in particular, Star Wars Legion has a fan-made mod, it's called, which is a module for Tabletop Simulator, where you can fully play the Star Wars Legion game. And the way it works is Asmodee, I was going to say FFG, but, it's moving to Atomic Mass Games. But in the past, FFG and Asmodee have released spoilers of cars. And as soon as those get released with a picture of the model, the community fans build that into the mod. So the mod generally has the most updated releases that have been spoiled on the internet, which is great. So this allows you the opportunity as a new player with one purchase of whatever Tabletop Simulator is at the time. I think last time I checked it was like $15. You can have access to the full Star Wars Legion line and be able to test out what you want to do before purchasing. I highly recommend going to the Discord channel or going on the Facebook group and finding someone who'd be willing to play with you and teach you how to A, use Tabletop Simulator, and B, teach you how to play the game. Then you'll have access to everything to see where your style is. And going back to my previous statements about playing multiple factions a few times, this will help you understand all the play styles of each of the factions. And it'll also help you make a better decision moving forward with your money. So I mentioned the Discord group and the Facebook groups. Highly recommend, there's even a Reddit group. Highly recommend joining all of them if you really want to get into the game. There's tons of helpful people out there that'll answer all kinds of questions for you, and you'll get a better feel of how the game plays. You'll get to see maybe your future state, which is seeing competitive players and hearing them talk. And, I think even some of the negative complaints can be helpful for you to decide what you want to do moving forward and whether you want to truly become a competitive player or if it's just going to be a casual weekend thing for you with your buddies. Now, this is all these are all acceptable answers, and it's just up to you personally what you are going to want to do over the long run. Now, a problem that may occur is you may not want to play either faction once you get the core box, one of the core boxes that you chose. So this is an opportunity in these groups that you could find somebody or someone locally who maybe has the other core set and wants to trade with you. It's okay that you don't like a certain faction. I don't think anybody would hold that against you. And you can pick whatever faction really speaks to you. And TTS, that's the shortened acronym for Tabletop Simulator. TTS is really going to help you figure out what faction speaks to you the most and how they play and how the game will move forward for you. The next thing that you really want to do is right now, it is at fantasyflightgames.com. It may move to Atomic Mass Games here shortly as the game was moved to a different division under Asmodee. You want to go look at the rules reference guide, or if you're on the community, it's often referred to as the RRG or the rules guide. The rules guide basically takes what's in the core box, which is a entry-level mechanics and game state, and advances that into what the full competitive game is. The rules reference guide is a PDF that's free and available on the web, on the Fantasy Flight site today, like I said, or Atomic Mass Games in the future. And really will give you an in-depth guide as all the different rule states that could potentially happen. There's a very in-depth rule set that now, because of all the different units that are out there, a lot of them have different rule sets. And so the RRG will really help you guide your decisions and understand what the full game looks like. So there's two different major versions of the game. There's skirmish and then there's competitive. Skirmish recently, maybe within the last year, had an update from the developers in FFG, and it's a 500-point game, which generally is around 4 to 5 units. And you can have these short little games, and it's played on a 3-foot by 3-foot size table or play space. Now, skirmish is great for as a next step from you got the core box. And as we move further down the podcast, we'll have episodes about what to get next based on your faction choice. But skirmish is a really good opportunity for you to play the game at a reasonably realistic level that plays by most of the same rules as the full competitive game, but allows you to do it quickly and cheaply, right? As far as unit purchasing, you can, for the most part, with each of the factions, you could put together a 500-point list that would allow you to play skirmish just out of the core box. Now, for those of you that are new, a list is the list of units that are in your army. You can find there's multiple list builders out there. We have one. It's legionhq.thefifthtrooper.com. And you can select what size army you want to build, which is 500 points of skirmish. And you could start adding in units there to see how much they're going to cost in these different modes, whether it's skirmish at 500 or competitive at 800 points. And so as you play, this is something you want to think about. Each unit has their point value on their card, and each of the upgrades that units have also have point values. And so these all add up into your total army cost in order to play. And so when you're playing, you want to have an equal cost as your opponent, or relatively close, right? So you may be able to get 500 points, but maybe your opponent can only get to 497. And that's okay. And those are going to be relatively equal, balanced lists. It all just depends on the units. So a lot of this moving forward past buying a core box is going to depend on where you want to be as a player and what your interest is going to lie as far as time, number of units you're willing to purchase, and also the play space that you're going to have to play. So the 800-point competitive playing space is 6 foot by 3 foot. So most war games these days play roughly on a 6 foot by 4 foot play space and have a bunch of terrain that they put on these tables. And so at 800 points, you're going to be on a double the skirmish. And also it takes a lot of time to get through 6 rounds or to an end game state in order to play a 800-point army. And I think this is something that originally as a new player you're not quite aware of, is that a game of Legion at a competitive level, a full game, can range anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 hours. That's a good average. That's 6 rounds in a game, and players taking turns with each unit per round. Now, a skirmish game can go anywhere between an hour to 90 minutes, and that's because it's smaller, less units that you have to worry about. So if you remember when I was talking about skirmish games usually run 4 to 5 units, where an average competitive game at 800 points can be 10 units to 12 units, roughly. Now, you'll see some on either side. Some people have 9, maybe 8 units. Some will have 13 or 14. It just all depends. But the average is around 10. So most stores that we've been to, if you're going to play at a store, once we're capable of doing that, generally play at the 800-point level. You can absolutely convince someone to play a 500-point skirmish. They'll love to play. There are different rules that you'll need to be aware of course, but most people would be willing to play that with you. At home, though, I think you really have a lot more options. I think skirmish is the way to go, especially if you're just starting off. You can really learn the rules well, and you can play it, like I said, with just the units out of the core box. That may be where you want to start before getting into an 800-point game. Maybe if you have a friend or locals who are also into Legion, getting them over for just a quick skirmish game on a 3x3, then you'll get a real good understanding of how the game's going to play and how much time you can expect once you get 10 to 11 units on the table per player. Now, here's the most controversial take I'm going to have in this whole podcast, which is most people will tell you, and even myself in the past, have said that the best thing to do next once you bought a core set is to buy another core set. And what we meant by that in the past was, with the Civil War set and even with the Clone Wars set, when they first came out, in order to get enough units to build up your armies, especially in an 800-point army, you need a lot of core units, which are the stormtroopers or rebel troopers or the droids, the B1 droids, or even the Phase 1 clones, right? Those are your core units. And you need those in order to play the game, because you have to have a minimum of 3 core units in order to play an 800-point game. Most of us have 4 to 5, right? So buying a duplicate core set, if you have a friend who's also playing, the value of that through the tokens and the extra tools that you would get with that, and then having extra core sets, generally outweighed the fact that you're getting duplicates of some of the heroes, right? And some of the other units you may not use as much. So the controversial statement is, I don't think that that's true anymore. I don't believe buying a second core set is what a new player should do. I believe that if you follow what I've been saying and you're really practicing and playing, and that you see what other units are capable of, especially through TTS, there's enough core unit variants now that you may want to just go buy what you need for the army that you're going to build. And maybe it is core units. Maybe you're going to buy a couple extra core units. But in the beginning, there was only one, even stormtroopers, there was only one box of stormtroopers, right? It's just one box, one type. Now there's 2 sets of stormtrooper boxes that you can buy, which is the stormtroopers, and then they have an expansion box now too. So if we stick on the Empire theme, Empire now has, if just off the top of my head, there's 4 different core unit types. One of them, which is the shore trooper mortar, you have to have shore troopers in your army in order to take the other one. But you have stormtroopers, shore troopers, and snow troopers. Each one has a varying play style and has a different technique on how they play, different weapon pool. So there's a lot of difference there that I think you would miss by buying a second core set. And then you may have a lot of units that you're not using anymore. And so if you're new and you really want to focus your buying power, I highly recommend, like I said, playing the game, playing it on TTS, reading the boards, reading all the groups, and seeing what's out there so that you understand the differences and the nuance between the different units before making another large purchase like another core box. So with that being said, we're going to end episode 1 here. And what we're going to do next week is cover the 4 factions, their style, each generally what their style is. And then I'm going to make recommendations to what your next purchase is based on each faction. So we'll break them down, and then I'll recommend what you could buy next, which would really get you moving into your next phase of building out your army. So really looking forward to talking to you next week. Please don't forget that on our blog, we will have a companion post to this. And check us out on thefifthtrooper.com, also patreon.com/thefifthtrooper, and on YouTube. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Looking forward to talking to you next week.
Join us next week for another edition of the Fifth Trooper podcast.
This has been a Fifth Trooper production.